Hi everybody, welcome back. In this video, we are going to discuss about the module 1 of our Introduction to Networks ITN course. The module 1 is networking today. So let's go into the video and let's see what are the objectives of this module and what we are going to learn in this module. So as discussed, this module is going to be the basics and it is going to give you an overview about how does the network impact everyday to day life. Okay, so let's go inside and let's see. Now this is how, or these are the different objectives of our module 1, which involves how the effect of networks on day-to-day life, network components, representation and topologies, what are the common ways of networks, what are the different types of networks, how the internet connections are being made, what do you mean by reliable network, what are the current trends, and a little bit into the network security factor. And finally, we are going to give you an overview about what are the different certifications that a network professional can take up. Now, the first thing and the most important thing is, how does a network affect our day-to-day life? In simple words, we say that network is the basic for any communication, and any person nowadays, what the first thing they do as soon as they wake up or open their eyes is to check their mobile phones for messages. So the networks has a very profound impact on human beings' life these days, and it actually provides communication, and it has completely erased all the boundaries. So nowadays, many applications that you can think of, including social networking, online communications, blogs, all those things are possible because of networks. In a way, network has made our life much more easier and much more open for everybody. Much more, we will be able to communicate more with everyone now. So now let's discuss about what are the basic network components that create this network. Now, usually when we talk about components of networks, there are two types of architectures. The most common architecture we use is called as client server architecture. So before we go into the client server architecture, let me talk about some of these common terminology that we use every day to describe networks. Every computer on a network is called a host or an end device. So whenever you come across a term called as host, system, any of these things, it always means that it is nothing but a system on which is connected to the network. Servers are computers that provide information to end devices. There are multiple servers that we use every day, which includes email servers, web servers, file servers, all those things, we call them as servers. And the other kind in this architecture is called as clients. Simple in to say, to quote a simple example, we can say that when we have a mobile phone and when we want to access Amazon.in, we click on the app, it automatically gets connected to the particular app and it will display the web page, or it will display the contents on your mobile phone. Our mobile phone is the client which is actually sending a request to the server to retrieve the information. So a server has the responsibility of not only just retrieving the information or providing you that information, or it will be able to provide some kind of computation on this data also. So all that is done through your server, where client is a machine which actually sends a request and gets a response from the server. So these are the different types of servers that we use daily. As I told earlier, it's an email server, web server, file server. And we will discuss more about these things once we go deep into the network curriculum. Now, if you see, the other type of architecture which we have is called as peer-to-peer. Here, there is no system that has been designated as a server or a client. Any system can either be a client or even a server. This peer-to-peer networking is very easy to set up because it can only cover small networks. In fact, if there are more than 10 or 15 systems, peer-to-peer networking might be difficult to implement. If you see the advantage, if you compare the advantages and disadvantages of peer-to-peer networking, the advantages, you can call them as easy to set up, it's less complex, lower cost, and for simple tasks, maybe for small file transfers or printer sharing, like those kind of tasks, peer-to-peer is good. The disadvantages of peer-to-peer architecture are you do not have a centralized administration, and it is not at all it's not as secure as you can think as a client and server, and is definitely not scalable, and the performance is comparatively slow when you compare it with the client server architecture. Most of the internet is built upon client server architecture. Now, if you go on, when we are discussing about the network components, I told you that most of the devices on the network are either host or end devices. So if you talk about an end device, the main thing here is an end device is where a message originates from or where it is received. So the end device can be your laptop, can be your mobile phone, can be a workstation or anything. So end device is where a message originates from and where it is received. So usually if you take this particular diagram, a person sitting here in this particular LAN can use an end device which actually creates a message, and this message flows through the network through various communication links, whatever links are being shown here, and it arrives to another end device. In fact, an end device is either the source or destination of a message that is transmitted across the network. Now, what are the intermediary network devices? So this is the second point, where these intermediary network devices are some things which actually connect these or interconnect these end devices. If you see in your own home, if you have a laptop or mobile phone, when you have a home internet connection, usually the most common way that you find in nowadays is your wireless router. Your wireless router is an intermediary network device. It connects all the devices in your home to the network connection to the outside world. So these intermediary network devices are the ones which actually connect or which provide connections between these end devices. The examples of these devices include switches, wireless access points, routers, and firewalls. So what are the main functions of these network devices? If you just write it down, see if you can. I have given a small sample points here. They are mainly responsible for regeneration and retransmitting the data signals, which is also a repeater. And if you see, the maintain information about what pathways exist through the network and internetwork, and if there are any errors or communication failures, their responsibility is to notify the others. And also, if there is a link failure, they have to direct the data along other paths and order what are the alternate paths available. And based on the priorities of the messages, they have to classify and direct these messages. And also, if security is being set up, their responsibility is to make sure either they permit or deny the flow of the data according to the settings set by the network administrator. And if you see, these representations are going to be the ones which we should get used to when we start using packet tracer. These are the common network representations. We have a slide which I am going to show to you in a few minutes, where we actually get a whole lot of all these representations, what they are, how they are, all the wireless routers, others. Now, another most important factor in a network is the network media. We have end devices, we have the intermediary devices, and all these devices are connected with links. These links are also called as network media. Now, usually the main categorization of media is either wired or wireless. In wired, once again, we have copper media and optical fibers. So, or we will be discussing more about this media in module 3, which actually explains more about the physical layer properties, physical layers, types of media, the types of connectors, the types of connections, the speed which they carry, all those things we will be discussing in your module 3. So here just remember that the main forms of media are either wired or wireless. Wired, once again, you have a cable. Wired means guided media that we call them as, and they are either made up of copper or optical fibers. In case of copper cables, we use electrical impulses to transmit the data from point A to point B. In case of optical fiber, we use light pulses because it's made up of glass. And with wireless transmission, you don't use either of them. We go for electromagnetic waves, and also we use specific frequencies for different types of wireless media. Now, what are the main criteria to choose which network medium is the best for? Because you can use anything. Now, the reason why you use optical cable, or the reason why you go for an copper media, or if you think that wireless medium is the best, you have to find out, or you have to give proper justification in order to select which network cable suits your purpose better. So these are the 4 main criteria, and the most important criteria is what is the maximum distance that the media has to carry the data, and what kind of environment is the media going to be installed in. It is going to be a harsh environment or a normal environment. The environment here comes means when it is exposed to too much of heat, or if it is underwater, or if there is any, it is surrounded by water, or what are the type of conditions that is being installed in, and what will be the amount of data, and what is the speed that we require to transmit this particular data. And finally, the most important is what is the cost of the media and installation. All these four criteria play a crucial role in the decision, in the final decision of which type of media is to be used, because some of the medium are cheap and some of the medium are expensive. Okay, so the next thing we go for is your network representations and topologies. In the previous slide, I showed you the different representations for the intermediary devices. If you see here, the network diagrams usually, if you are going to ask me, sir, why do we need all these representations or these kind of things? When we are going to use packet tracer, we are going to talk about topology diagrams in the next slide. So those topology diagrams, these particular representations of each and every network component will be able to give you a clear picture how the network is designed and how the network is running. So if you see here, the first top box gives you the different representation of end devices. You see the desktop computer, you see a laptop, you see a printer, you see a wireless tablet, IP phone, and a telepresence endpoint. These are all the end devices. As I said, end devices are the devices which actually create and receive the information. Now coming to the intermediary devices, whose main role is to connect the end devices. If you see, the most important one is the wireless router, LAN switch, router, multi-layer switch, and a firewall appliance. And the last component is the network media, which actually allows you to connect the end devices with the intermediary devices. There are three types of media: LAN media, WAN media, and wireless medium. These are the network representations which we have to get very much used to, because when you see a packet tracer topology, you should be able to understand which device connects which network and all those things. Now, this is how a packet tracer diagram looks like. You must have come across the term topology whenever you study networks. So topology means the way how the devices are connected in the network. Anybody who is working with networks should have an understanding about what is a topology and how do you connect, because topology itself, choosing the right topology is actually very much in proportional to the performance of the network. There are different topologies that you must have studied in your computer networks course, which includes bus topology, ring topology, mesh topology, star topology. Here in our course, we actually divide the topologies into two things. One of it is called a physical topology. The other one is called as a logical topology. The main difference between these two topologies are, if you check out the physical topology part here, the physical topology is going to illustrate the actual location of these intermediary devices and cable installations. I mean to say that if you check out here, all the notations written are here, like server room. The other one is being like email server, which rack it is, what type of shelf are we placed at all. All these are physical locations, how these each are connected. So this router is placed at rack 1, shelf 1, and this is called as physical topology, which because it will tell you the exact location of these devices, which includes the room numbers, stack numbers, or shelf numbers, all those kinds of things. If you see, this particular network goes to the class 1, class 2 room number, is a physical topology. But in this course or in CCNA, we will be very much using this particular topology called as logical topology, which actually show you how the network is designed, which port numbers are connected, all those kinds of things. If you see the same diagram in a logical topology point of view, if you can see here, there is a router here, and you see that this particular, the router's interface G0/1, this stands for a gigabit port, gigabit Ethernet. There are types of Ethernet which includes like fast Ethernet, gigabit Ethernet. We will be using F0/2, which stands for fast Ethernet ports. If you see here, these are the fast Ethernet ports, and these are your gigabit Ethernet ports, G0/0. We will talk more about the ports, how we get them, and we can play with the ports also during our later classes. So these are the different ports, and if you can also see here, each and everything is mentioned with the network address. You can see a network address written down here for each and every one of these networks. So this particular class 1, this is a particular network 1, this is the network 2, this is the network 3, this is the network 4, and this is the network 5. Okay, so you can see here the logical topology will give you what the different network addresses are, how they are connected, to which ports are they connected, and all other those kind of things. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Usually whenever you want to distinguish networks, the most important thing you should keep in brain is there is no one way of distinguishing or dividing networks. You cannot say networks can be divided through this. Based on this, I can classify networks or I can categorize networks. There is no one common thing. But the most common way of doing it is through size. So before we go into the size based categorization of networks, what you can understand is if you have something here, the broader classification we can call them as small home networks, small office home networks, that those are called as SOHO. You can see here small office, home office, medium to large networks, and worldwide networks, which are hundreds of millions of computers connected together. And to make more sense of these things, most common types that we see daily are either LANs or WANs, local area networks or wide area networks. The criteria through which you decide whether it is a LAN or a WAN is based on the area covered and the number of users connected, types of services available, area of responsibility. You can see here there are 3 LANs connected in this particular diagram, and these 3 LANs are interconnected to one another through a WAN. So this is your WAN network, and the remaining ones are all your LAN networks, local area networks, and WAN stands for wide area network. And the main comparison when you come between a LAN and WAN is pretty simple. You must have known this because you must have covered this in your computer networks course. LAN is a type of network which connects few number of devices within a limited geographical area. WAN is a kind of network which covers a wide geographical area. LAN is usually owned by a single organization. WAN is actually not owned, but it is actually governed by an ISP. LANs provides high-speed bandwidth to internal devices, whereas WANs provide speeds at a lesser rates than you compare with a local area network. Simply put, LAN is a place which actually provides you network connectivity within a small area. WAN is a type of network which provides connectivity across a large geographical area. This is the main classification, and the most common term that we use every day is your internet. The internet is nothing but it's a worldwide collection of all interconnected LANs and WANs, simply put. And who owns the internet? Nobody owns the internet, but there are some professional organizations which actually govern the internet. So these are some of our organizations: IETF, IAB, Internet Engineering Task Force, Internet Research Task Force, Internet Architecture Board, all these things. We will be discussing more about these professional bodies later and what their role is, how they actually govern the internet, and what is the responsibility of each of these own bodies. We'll discuss it later on. Another major classification of networks is also through how they are connected and to which components they are connected. One of them is being intranet and the other one is called as extranet. And if you check out the diagram here, if I'm creating a network which is only accessible to the users within my own area, if I create a network which is accessible only by the students of my organization, but not from the outer world, it is called as an intranet. It is secure because no other organization or no other person from outside will be accessing your network. The extranet is a slight extension to the intranet. That means if I have a trusted third party, if I want to provide service or if I want to provide access to somebody else whom I trust, then that is called an extranet. So our own employees, and at the same time, if I provide the access to a trusted third party to whom I trust or whom I collaborate with, then I call it as an extranet. If I provide access to everybody, then comes the internet. So these are the 3 ways we also have categorizing: one, intranets, extranets, and the internet. Please remember these 3 terms. Intranet is only for internal usage. Extranet is for internal as well as the trusted third party ones. Internet means everybody. So I hope you got this. And the next thing that we are going to discuss is what are the different types of internet connections that we have in order to provide access to either homes or corporate offices. Now let's talk about the SOHO, the home office and small office internet connections. Most commonly in our country, now we have cable internet. That means we get high bandwidth, always on internet. These are also actually offered usually by the cable TV services. The other option is DSL, digital subscriber lines. This is also a high bandwidth, always on internet connection. The third type is called as cellular connection. The fourth one is satellite. Usually satellite connection is preferred in areas where there is no cable, maybe rural areas or very small villages, like those kind of things. only satellite connections are preferred, and dial-up telephone I think it has become obsolete now, because usually a long time ago, whenever we want internet through BSNL, we used to dial the modems, and if internet is there, we will not have the telephone services, that kind of vice versa thing. The dial-up telephony, which is a very low bandwidth one and it's inexpensive one, and it's no longer in use. So these are the different types of connections through which we get the internet into a small type of office or even home office. Whereas the other ones, which are for business interconnections, these things won't work usually. And the most common way where an organization gets internet at high bandwidth is through a leased line. Usually the expenses for maybe 100 Mbps or 1 lakh per month, I think. This is a leased line where they get dedicated bandwidth for the organization. Once the leased line comes into the network, then from there onwards, the network administrator, what he does is he breaks them into smaller subnets, and he can provide appropriate bandwidth to each subnet based on the requirement. The other one is something called as Ethernet 1, also called as Metro Ethernet, and the third one is DSL. Once again, this is a business DSL which supports very high bandwidths. And the last one is satellite. The satellites are the option, or the option of satellite is taken only when there is no other solution available. When there is no wired solution to get that high speed bandwidth, only then we go for satellite. These are how our normal homes or even offices or even larger corporate offices are connected to the internet. Now, this particular term, something called as converging network. Earlier days, when we want to set up a network in a particular home or in a particular office, which needs different types of network services, we need to run different cables for each service. Each service used to have its own protocols, used to have its own rules and standards, which is very cumbersome. But now, with the advent of these converging networks, these networks are capable enough, converging networks are capable enough of delivering data, voice, and video over the same network infrastructure. And the most important thing here is, now for this network infrastructure, it uses the same set of rules and standards. And converged data networks carry multiple services on the same network. This is one advantage which has made networking very attractive for most of the corporate offices. And let's talk about how do you call a network a reliable network, or what are the most important things, or what are the most important characteristics that a network should have. Now, usually when we talk about network, anybody can design a network. To call it as a good network, it should have these 4 properties. The 4 properties are the 4 basic characteristics that make a network architecture a good one. Is the first one called as fault tolerance, the second one is called as scalability, the third one is called as quality of service, the fourth one is called as security. Now let's discuss about each and every one of these characteristics in detail. What do you mean by fault tolerance, scalability, quality of service, QoS, and security? Quality of service and security, most of them are self-explanatory. Let's talk about fault tolerance. A fault tolerance network is the one which actually limits the impact of a failure by limiting the number of affected devices. In simpler terms, if I put it, I can say it as, if there is a failure, it should not impact the entire network. That failure should be limited to that particular point only. So those are called as fault tolerance network. In order to provide fault tolerance, we use a technique called as adding redundancy. That means you go for a packet switch network. If you check out in the diagram, there is a router fault here. If this router fails, then automatically this link is no longer valid. So for these devices to connect to the internet, there is a secondary path here. The second path, it can forward. Once this router knows about the unavailability of this router, it automatically forwards the packets through this particular interface or through this particular link, and they can reach the network. So providing such things is called as a fault tolerant network. Fault tolerant networks are actually provided or are actually made possible by adding redundancy. So multiple links are there. Next comes our scalability. Scalability is a property where if we should be able to add many devices without having an impact on the entire network. If you check out here, we usually have here 1, 2, 3. There are 3 LANs here, and a scalable network can expand quickly and easily to support new users and applications without impacting the performance of services to existing users. Now, if you check out here, this LAN is full, this LAN is full. Now I can add any of these these two switches. Let us say if there are 24 ports, I can add 24 more devices. I can add 20 devices more in each of these two networks. So while I'm adding these new devices to this network also, this new addition should not have an impact on the performance of these earlier ones. So such networks are called as scalable ones. I can add many number of users. I can add other services also. That particular property of the network to support new users without degrading its performance is called as scalability, and it is very much required when you're designing a LAN. And the third one here, we call it as quality of service. So quality of service, simply put, in simpler terms, in layman terms, if you call it, quality of service is providing assurance of the characteristics required for a desired service. Now, through internet, we actually use it for many purposes. Some might play videos, some might play games, some might listen to music, some might upload documents, some might send an email. There are multiple types of services that is possible through nowadays internet. Now, in order to provide support to these different types of services, not just one thing is sufficient. Not one type of service. Not all the services require the same type of assurities or guarantees from the network for better performance. Now, if you take a YouTube video, if you are watching the YouTube video, if it is continuously pausing, or if you are watching a live match, if it is continuously pausing for 2 minutes and then playing for 1 minute and then pausing for 2 minutes, it does not relate to a good user experience. For these live videos, the streaming should be good and without any pauses. So for these particular packets, fast thing or the fast delivery of these packets is more required than reliable delivery of the packets. So such kind of things comes under quality of service. So to ensure reliable delivery and also to provide service to the type of packet that you are actually transmitting, all those comes under quality of service. So quality of service actually provides services to the packets based on the type, based on the type of the packet, whether it is a voice or IP packet, or whether it is a video packet, or whether it is a normal email packet. All those kind of things will come into play when you decide what type of service you are going to provide for this particular packet. That comes under quality of service. And the last criteria, which is very important, something called as network security. Usually whenever a network administrator sets up a network, his job is not just to make sure that the network is up and running, but the primary part of his job is also to ensure that the network is secure. Securing a network is actually divided into two things once again. The first one is something called as network infrastructure security, and the second one is called as information security. Network infrastructure security is going to tell you, or is going to talk about physically securing the network devices using locks, placing them inside, closing locks, alarms, all those kind of things, physically securing the device, and also to prevent unauthorized access to the device. So only a person who is related to the network domain should enter into the server room. Nobody else should come into the server room. Those kind of things are provided to make sure that the security of the network infrastructure. The second category, something called as information security, actually relates to secure the information while it is being transmitted across the network. We will cover these things in detail a few minutes later. The three main goals of a security, also called as CIA triad, are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. To explain these three terms, usually we call them as CIA triad. Please remember this term, CIA triad. And confidentiality is going to say that only the intended recipients must read the data. The contents, whatever you are sending, must not be visible to a third party. Only the sender and receiver must understand what it is. That comes under confidentiality criteria. The next criteria is called as integrity. Integrity will assure you that the data was not altered during transmission. So whatever data the sender has sent, the data has been received by the receiver in its exact state. No changes are being made by anybody. The third one, availability, is it provides assurance of access to the data by reliable or for authorized users. So if you are authorized user, if you wish to transmit the data or if you wish to access the data, they should always be available. That is called as availability. Together, these three play a very crucial role in network security. That is the reason most of the terms, or whenever you study cybersecurity courses, you will definitely come across this terminology called as CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. And this particular topic is going to cover what are the current network trends that are happening nowadays. So these network trends, usually there are four categories, or they have listed four different types of trends that they observed, which are actually creating an impact in the network domain. As you guys know, networking is a type of domain which continuously keeps on changing. It keeps on transforming every day and day. New technologies come into play, new devices come into play. So it's not just a single thing that you can learn and by heart and keep aside. It keeps on evolving, it keeps on changing, it keeps on transforming. Now, these are the four different, the four new networking trends that have come into play. The first one is something called as bring your own device. BYOD, bring your own device. The second one is online collaboration, which we discussed in the very first slide. And the third one, something called as video communication. Once again, every day, most of the people are talking on the WhatsApp, video calls, Google Geo calls, all these things, video communications, video teleconferencing, even Zoom, all these things. And the last one is cloud computing. So let's discuss about these trends for a little bit. So if you take the first trend, something called as bring your own device, it actually allows users to use their own devices, giving them more opportunities and greater flexibility. So usually when you see earlier days, when you go to a particular office, you are only allowed to work on the office systems. You are not supposed to take your laptops or any other electronic devices into the area where you work on sensitive information. But nowadays, the trend is in such a way that whenever you take something or whenever you want to work on particular sensitive data, can still carry your own laptop so that you can carry your work from home. The simplest example is work from home. Most of you guys must have known that. So this actually gives you the freedom to use your own personal tools, your own system, which you are very much used to and which you feel much more comfortable with. So all these things. But though it's a good thing, the main problem with BYOD is it actually very much lacks the security factor. We never know what your system might contain, what kind of virus it may bring. Whenever you connect your system to the local intranet, whatever malware your system is carrying, that might pass on to the server, infecting everybody in the network. So though BYOD or bring your own device concept is good, it provides much more comfortable, or it provides much more freedom to the end user. It also brings a sense of lack of security into the network. The other three things, the first thing is online collaboration, which I would not want to go deep about because everybody knows what an online collaboration is. Everybody has been doing it. You take it social groups, or take it whatever you can think of, emails, all those things are online collaboration. The third one is something called as video communication. Once again, video calls are being made every day in the world. There are lots of online meetings that are happening. Even our chief ministers and prime ministers are talking through video conferencing. They're talking about every day we are seeing now virtual classrooms. All of them comes under video communication, of which video conferencing is a very powerful tool. The last one, which is called as cloud computing, which has grown leaps and bounds. And it is actually, cloud computing it will allow you to store personal files or backup or data on servers over the internet. You know that every day the bank transactions keep updated to the cloud, which is situated somewhere. In layman terms, once again, whenever you're using Facebook, whenever you're using Dropbox or any other types of even Google Drive, all these are examples of cloud computing, where you are storing your data, which is accessible anywhere. Even your webmail, it is accessible anywhere. So the cloud actually has cut down the costs of smaller and medium scale industries, and also they allowed you to access your data anywhere in the world, irrespective of the place and location. If you store it in the cloud, it is available anywhere as long as you have an internet connection. And talking about cloud computing, it is actually made possible because of the concept of data centers. And usually when I talk about these data centers, we don't find smaller companies or small organizations owning trying to set up their own data centers, because it is an expensive one. That is the reason usually they tend to lease them from larger companies like Google, Amazon, Cisco, all these people. Even our NetAcad runs on AWS. So the concept of data center has made it very much attractive for a normal or a small business to actually move to a cloud-based solutions. And there are usually four types of clouds. The first one is something called as a public cloud. The second one is called as private cloud. The third one, hybrid cloud. And the last one, custom cloud, or in most of the terminology, we call them as community clouds. So the name itself suggests it's a public cloud. It is available to general public, maybe pay-per-use model, or maybe free. Anybody can access it. So it's not at all secure, but it is much more open for everybody. Whereas coming to a private cloud, this cloud is only for a specific organization or from one particular entity or one particular office, where the access is very much restricted. Only authorized users of that organization, only the authorized users who got permission from the network administrator only can actually access the private cloud. A hybrid cloud is a mix and match of these two things. It can be a private, I mean, I can set up a private cloud for all my internal data, and for normal data like Facebook or email, I can have a public cloud. So this is what we mean by hybrid cloud. A community cloud is a kind of one, or a custom cloud is one which is actually built for a particular group. So if 2 or 3 education institutions want to set up their own cloud, but they don't have the funds to do on their own, so they come together, they form a community, and they establish the cloud, and they share the maintenance of the cloud among themselves. Then we call it as a community cloud. With the community cloud, the access is actually provided only to the users who belong to that particular community, or you can also call them as custom clouds. Okay, so the next one, now how a technology, what are the technology trends that are being coming into the homes? This is also the network trend, and most of you guys must have heard about the term Internet of Things, IoT, where you can do anything literally. We have seen ads where a fan talks to your system, where you can actually switch on your TV from anywhere, switch off the AC from anywhere through internet, all those things, even your Internet of Things. And most notable one in these technology trends in the home is the power line networking. This power line networking is where you can actually allow the devices connecting to a LAN, where allow the devices to connect to a LAN without the network cable also. Even though whatever electrical cables that you are installed in your house, that you got installed in your home, those particular cables can be used for doing this PoE, power over Ethernet, also called as power line networking. So this particular power line networking is very much essential, or is very much useful when wireless access points cannot reach all the devices in the home. There are some places where setting up the wiring networks is practically not possible or not feasible. In those cases, this power line networking comes into play, and it is very useful in such cases. Coming to the wireless broadband, we call them as wireless WISPs, wireless internet service providers, where we have an large access points or outside the home, and all the devices in your home can connect to those access points by paying some money. We call them as wireless broadband, and you actually provide a hotspot, simply to say a hotspot outside, and whatever devices that you have in your homes or in everybody home can connect to that hotspot. That is called as wireless broadband technologies. Coming to this chapter is going to talk about the details of the network security. As I told you, security has become a very crucial factor while you talk about networks. So network management, it's okay, but securing a network plays a very crucial role. If you set up a network and everything is good, but unfortunately if it's not secure and all the data is being lost, nobody is going to bother. Nobody is going to say that it is a good network. So securing a network also plays a crucial role if you are to become a good network administrator. So let's talk about network security for a bit, and what are the basics of network security. Whenever you talk about network security, you always come across the term called as a threat. So as I said, these are the things. Now securing a network is just not a simple protocol, is not just a single algorithm. It actually involves many protocols, technologies, devices, tools, and techniques. Because all these put together, and they unless until work together, they are unable to secure our data. Securing our data means, as I said, the 3 main important factors: confidentiality, integrity, and availability should be maintained. The threat is something which actually tries to compromise our data or our secure data. These threats can either be internal ones or can also be an external one. If you check out this diagram, you see there is a host, and there we have shown you 2 arrow marks where a threat is coming from internal, who might be anybody. It might be a disgruntled employee or somebody else, or a virus infected system. whereas an external threat comes from the internet. So you usually have a firewall to screen those kind of things. Now, if you check it out, the external threats, we have a long list of them. And if you see the first kind of external threat, which is one of the most common ones, is called as virus, worm, and Trojan horse. Simply put, malwares. I call them as malwares, malicious softwares. So these are the three ones which are most commonly found when you click on unwanted links, or when you see an email containing a dubious attachment, all those things which actually plant something onto your system. And once it is planted on your system, they can take control of your system, or they can copy information from of your system. So those are the three things. And belonging to the same category, we also have spyware and adware. This spyware is one which is more there to steal your information without you guys knowing it. It might be a simple keylogger, which will actually, whenever you type onto the internet, whatever keystrokes you're typing on your system, it can capture it and it can take them to particular CNC center or any third party who is controlling that. And this is called as spyware. Adware is more irritating rather than being problematic, because when you click adware is not something which actually keeps on popping too many ads on a website, browser, or those kind of things. The third one, also called as a zero-day attack. Please remember this, because there are a lot of bug bounty programs for network administrators which actually provide huge good money if you are able to find any kind of zero-day exploits. So these zero-day attacks or zero-hour attacks, these attacks, we call them when they are actually first made, when nobody knows about this particular vulnerability, that a vulnerability exists and how to exploit that particular vulnerability. And if somebody else does that, that is called as a zero-day attack. So zero-day attack is an attack which is actually done for the very first time through that particular manner. Okay, so you know about a vulnerability, nobody has known about that vulnerability at all, and if you exploit that, then that is called a zero-day attack. The other is something called as a threat actor attack. So this threat actor attack is nothing but who is a malicious person who uses maybe he tries to attack the network devices or any of the network resources. And the third one, on the next one, something called as denial of service attacks, DOS attacks. These DOS attacks are much more targeted towards either to slow down your system or to crash your system or applications, simply because we don't want an authorized user to use that resource at that particular point of time. There is a variant of this also called as DDoS attack. That is the reason you keep on finding those captchas and click on the screens, all those kind of things, to make sure that zombies in the sense, the particular systems which are actually infected does not do a DDoS attack. The next one is something called as data interception and theft. So this is a kind of attack which actually captures all the private information from an organization's network and sends it over. Identity theft, once again, if you lose something, if somebody else gets your Aadhaar card details and goes and applies a lot of credit cards on your name, all of those things comes under identity theft. You have to make sure that your credentials are kept safe and never kept public. So there is some information about you guys, your sensitive information should never be made public, because or else you will be very much susceptible to an identity theft. The next type of threat is something called as internal threat. As I told you, internal threats are also very serious and they have to be taken seriously. It might be anything. So if the internal threat can come from a disgruntled employee who is not at all happy with the company, they might do an internal threat. Or even if he brings his laptop which is infected by a malware, or if he brings his pen drive, maybe he doesn't know what it contains and he plugs it into one of your network systems. All those things comes under internal threats. So when we are talking about securing a network or developing a security policy, it is very, very important to make sure that you address both internal and external security threats also. None of these two is to be taken lightly, and both should be addressed properly. And to tackle these security problems, we have different types of security solutions. Some of the security solutions are maybe as basics of including buying an antivirus or updating your Windows firewall filtering for personal users or for small home users. In case of corporate networks, they have to go a little bit further, because they will be covering large networks, large number of systems. So in those cases, what we usually do is we have dedicated firewall systems, access control lists, intrusion prevention systems, and VPNs, virtual private networks. So these four protective measures which are dedicated firewalls, ACLs, IPS, and VPN, are actually very much suited for large networks and corporate networks. In addition to the antivirus, anti-spyware, and firewall filtering, these requirements are necessary because they contain a vast amount of sensitive data, and once if their system is compromised, it reflects very badly on the entire organization's portfolio. So coming to the last chapter of our particular module, it covers the IT professional. In a sense, it actually tells you about the different certifications of offered by Cisco and CCNA. So if you want to choose a network career path, you have to start from CCNA, then you can go for specialist CCNP, CCIE. Most of these particular certifications are very important whenever you want to upgrade yourself, even in your even if you are working. So this particular topic gives you an overview of all the different types of certifications that are now available under Cisco. So with this, we close out our module 1's explanation. This module 1 actually is going to only give you a basic about all the network fundamentals, and in our module 2, we will be covering about the switch and router configurations. What are the basic configurations? The network representations which I told you earlier, you should understand them, or you should visualize them, because they are very much essential for you to use the packet tracer. Also, I will provide the more information about packet tracer once we start working on your module 2. We will do a small demos on that particular module 2 to show you how the basic configuration steps work. So thank you very much, and I hope this particular video is useful. Thank you very much.